Okay, I'm going to read an Italian anecdote from Hugo's Italian Reading Simplified. Fu domandato ad un uomo che ritornava da un viaggio da lui fatto in Olanda: avete trovato gli olandesi molto ospitali? Altro che ospitali, rispose egli. Mi hanno mantenuto a spese loro tutto il tempo che sono stato nel loro paese. Egli dimenticava però di dir che, essendo stato arrestato per truffa poco dopo il suo arrivo, aveva dovuto rimanere in prigione tutto il tempo che aveva soggiornato colà. And that means it was asked to a man who was returning from a journey made by him in Holland, "Have you found the Dutch very hospitable?" "More than hospitable," he replied. "They have maintained me at their own expense all the time that I was in their country." He forgot, however, to say that having been arrested for swindling shortly after his arrival, he had been compelled to remain in prison all the time that he had sojourned with them.
Okay.
What an anecdote.
That's great. That's wonderful.
She was born in England, in Nottingham, and after Nottingham, long after that, they moved to Bristol, although they'd lived in other places as well. But Bristol was where they spent the most time, and which they enjoyed being in the most. And so in 1911, and my grandfather had a jewelry shop in Bristol. In fact, we even have a picture of it in one of the books about Bristol, that period. I think it was photographed in 1906. Anyway, in 1911, they boarded a ship called the Royal Edward and went to Canada, actually emigrated. And they wound up in Winnipeg, the capital of Manitoba, and lived there for 9 years. I know my aunt was a nurse there. I'm not sure what my mother did. Anyway, by around 1920, they moved to California, to Southern California, in fact to Los Angeles. And my grandfather set up a jewelry shop in San Fernando Valley, in San Fernando. And sometime after she arrived in Los Angeles, she got a job in an organization, dry goods or something like that, at where my father was working. So that was where they met. And then they got married about 1922, I think it was. And at some point my father left that organization. I'm not quite sure why, but he had a job with the Reliance, I think it was a Reliance Rock Company or something, as an auditor or accountant. This was just at the beginning of the Depression, and but somehow he survived that and was able to continue earning money. So we weren't really really affected much by the Depression. I mean, at least it didn't seem to me that it was very significant, although of course lots of other people were really hard hit. Probably was in a cocoon because I don't recall other kids complaining. We went to school and nobody ever talked about it that I heard or have any recollection of. Earthquake, 1933, March of 1933. It was severe enough. In fact, I remember being in our backyard and having the illusion that that the ground was rising and falling. The shake was so palpable. Anyway, the school I'd been going to was considered disabled or condemned or something, so we had to go elsewhere. So where did I go but to a Catholic school that was a couple of blocks away from where the 54th Street School was, which was run by nuns, and it was just for one semester. It was the spring. Well, I must have come in late, but it was the spring semester of 1933, and I didn't get on with the nuns at all. They didn't like me very much, and I remember trying to get to Mass. They had an early morning Mass before classes started, and I was usually late, and I was reprimanded by the nun who saw me come in late, told me not to do it again. Oh, coming up, after that term, when the summer vacation came, I think my parents felt that I shouldn't be going back there. And they're right. So I was sent to Normandy Avenue School, which is a regular public school. I don't know how far it went, but it at least covered the elementary grades. Well, in the I guess it was the English class, they gave us a book to read, and it was a condensed version of Les Miserables. And I think the section we were given to read was the one on Jean Valjean. You know, the guy that was he'd been in the galleys and escaped, and he was put in the galleys because he'd stolen bread. He smashed a window in a bakery shop and took a loaf of bread because he was starving and his family was too. So anyway, he was sent for 19 years in the galleys at Toulon. So anyway, this story of Jean Valjean really appealed to me. It just struck me as a wonderful story. And I later got the entire book, which I took a long time reading, but I did. I should have read it in French. So that's how that came about, that I was struck by it. Yeah. There was another one that we read, I don't think it was the same one, that had other stories. There was one about a girl somewhere in South America, Peru maybe, who broke a pitcher. That's about all I remember. The early days we lived at 1842 West 46th Street in Los Angeles, but then we moved to Alexandria Avenue about, I think, in September of 35, probably, thereabouts. And I was lucky because I got to go to a better school, I think, than I would have if we'd stayed where we were. So I went to Alexandria Avenue School, which was just a block from where we lived, from where our apartment was. At this elementary school in the sixth grade, we went into the auditorium, and there was a speaker, apparently, who came in, and he, I think he fancied himself to be a tune detective, and he showed how he was able to identify tunes just by hearing certain portions of it, and that always intrigued me, and I was very keen. And maybe it was the detective part, I'm not sure, but I think I always remember that tune detective thing, and the idea of being able to recognize tunes, which I can do to this day. Well, we had a music period in that school, and it was in the basement of the school. And I remember hearing operatic music there, and particularly they performed this piece of operatic material that had the Gypsy Maiden. I think it was Il Trovatore, and we guys that sat in the back sort of got a kick out of this, the Gypsy Maiden. They kept repeating, and I've always remembered that. It was a very enjoyable thing. Going back to elementary school, in the last year, which was 1936, I got into a fight with a guy. In fact, I'd often quarreled with him. What was his name? Don Eugster or something. His father ran a butcher shop in Los Angeles, and we got into a fist fight outside the grounds, just outside the grounds of the school, and I was beating him up, and then somebody stopped us, and I had a torn shirt and had to go home and tell everything that happened. I don't think I was disciplined for it, but I was told not to do it again.
Mm-hmm. So how'd your mom take the torn shirt?
Well, she wasn't pleased, but I don't know whatever happened to it. Maybe it got mended. Mm-hmm. I didn't worry about those things in those days. Well, in elementary school, I don't recall any classes that I found exciting, although I got good grades. But I remember one thing, I got introduced to cryptography there, or somehow I came to know about it, and I invented a code to be used among just a few friends there, and I wrote messages and got some messages back. And then it turned out that the teacher, our teacher, homeroom teacher or whatever she was, broke our code. Because it was a fairly simple one, a simple substitution code. So that kind of put an end to that. I don't know how demoralized I was. I just took it in stride. I remember we had a theater at the end of our street on Western Avenue, about 2 or 3 blocks away, and it was called the Rivoli, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember one day I ran away from home because I was angry with my mother, and but what I did, I just went up to the corner to wait for my father to get off the bus, and it had been planned that we would go and see a film at the Rivoli that night, and I think they had the idea of disciplining me because I had been angry with my mother, but it didn't turn out that way. It blew over, and there was a film called The Black Cat, and we got to see that.
I don't think I've ever heard of that film. Do you know who was in it, or is it?
It may have been people like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, but I'm not sure. But it was an exciting film, especially for a little kid. It was fun. I could wander all over the place, and there was no danger.
Did you go to the beach, mountains?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, we went to Santa Monica Beach, and That was on Venice Beach as well, which is not far from Santa Monica. I remember when I was about, what would I have been, 6 or 7 years old, and they had an old Essex, a car that's no longer made, and my uncle was driving it, and he let me sit at the driver's seat, or sit on his lap and steer it. That's what it was. That was a great moment for me. I really enjoyed it. We moved later, I think about 1937, to 3rd Street, to a house on 3rd Street in Los Angeles. And that was fairly close to where my junior high school was, which was Virgil Junior High School. Very good school, in fact. And so I was within walking distance of that, too, which is very good. But I used to hitchhike to school. My parents gave me money for the bus, but invariably I hitchhiked, saved the money, and then I and some other guys would raid apartment houses, the basement of apartment houses, to get empty bottles to take and sell. So we did that for some time. Occasionally we were caught, but it didn't seem to make much difference. It didn't seem very exciting.
No, it seems actually pretty exciting.
I had a wonderful teacher for English and history both. The same teacher taught those two subjects, and I did projects. I did a project on England. I forget what the actual substance was, and another project on China, and produced a little booklet on it. And I remember the teacher saying, "You should be careful, don't strain your eyes, you're doing too much." Well, we had a bookshop near my junior high school, and it was an old sort of unkempt bookshop, and I remember seeing books on Yugoslavia and maps of Yugoslavia and Russia there that intrigued me. I really enjoyed looking at that stuff, and that might have contributed to my interest in those areas. It was through my grandfather, who seemed to think that I had some interest or talent for languages. And when I was 11, it was at my 11th birthday, in fact, he gave me 3 books. One was Hugo's Spanish Simplified, the other was Hugo's French Simplified, and the other was Hugo's German Simplified. And they were sort of standard books in those days. I mean, not school texts, but for the general public. And so I got those. But I also told my mother that what I really would like is a Russian book, like Hugo's Russian Simplified. And so she got that for me. So for my birthday, I had those four books. My grandfather would teach me some German, because he spoke it, I think, almost natively. I remember asking him how certain words were pronounced. In fact, I recall saying Guten Abend. He says, "No, Guten Abend is what we say." So he corrected my mispronunciations and fed me a few words. I'm going to read a selection from Wilhelm Tell, or William Tell by Schiller. And this is it's kind of a poem, or it's a rhyming thing. from the first act and the first scene, and he's describing it's like a fisherman describing a scene near where he fishes. Es lächelt der See, ladet zum Bade, der Knabe schlief ein am grünen Gestade. Da hört ein Klingen, wie Flöten so süß, wie Stimmen der Engel im Paradies. Und wie erwachet in festiger Lust, da spülen die Wasser ihm die Brust. Und es ruft aus den Tiefen, lieb Knabe, bist mein. Ich locke den Schläfer, ich zieh ihn herein. And what that means is that the sea is smiling or laughing. He invites people in to bathe. The boy falls asleep on the green grass. Then he hears a ringing sound, like fleets so sweet, like voices of angels in paradise. And as he awakes in blessed air, then the waters spill over him, over his chest, and it calls from the deep, "Dear boy, be mine. I entice the sleeper, I draw him within." Well, I think she would have liked to have been a nurse or something in that profession, but she never did. Of course, it wasn't the usual thing for women to work in those days, and more women stayed at home than were in the marketplace. But anyway, I think she should have done more. And she liked to give to charity and that sort of thing. But it's sort of hard for me to describe because I'm not sure I ever really knew her very well. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course I did know her, but I never felt very close to her. Mm-hmm. I think she was better at disciplining me than my father was.
Mm. So she had this knack for English discipline.
It's a real knack. It comes with a breed.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he was away at the office during the day when I would misbehave.
Well, how badly could you have misbehaved? I mean, you're an only child, right? So, what did you do?
Well, I'm trying to remember. Why was I disciplined? Well, sometimes for coming home late from school, I tended to dawdle and get involved in other things, and so I didn't always try to get home on time.
You were interested in being a kid.
I think so.
That kind of sums that up, right?
I could remember her playing some what were then popular tunes, and played by ear, it seemed to me. I don't ever remember reading sheet music. Well, we had recordings in the house. We had a gramophone, or we played popular tunes of the day, and I can still remember some of them. But that was quite an influence as well, though I didn't realize it at the time. But we did have that. Well, I think it was fairly warm. I mean, I'm not sure if it's really close to him, but then I probably didn't encourage it either. Come to thinking back, I mean, I didn't really try to be nice to my parents.
Does that mean you were recalcitrant? What does that mean? Or that you were a loner? I mean, is that another way to say that, or was it something else?
Well, yeah, I guess that is true. I was sort of a loner. Yeah. And we used to go on walks together, if only to go up to the store, shops, or something like that. And we would chat then. But he did have me come to his office, and in fact, more than once, I did some work for him in there. I was checking figures and stuff like that, which was kind of fun. I enjoyed doing that. I don't think he had any hobbies. I think he liked traveling, and we did go on vacations just about every year to various places. I remember we went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and then over across the Continental Divide, where we dropped down from Montana into Idaho. Made that kind of trip, and we went to San Francisco several times. Let's see. I remember that happened on a Sunday, December 7th, and I was at church with my parents, and the minister or the dean, whoever it was, got up and made the announcement that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And I remember my father standing on his feet to hear better or something, because he was so astonished. But that was my first. Well, it was right after it happened. There were air raid precautions in Los Angeles, and people had to black out their houses or the windows, which we did too. I got an invitation, a greeting from the Selective Service, I think it was. Yeah, so I was drafted, and I went in. I was given one week's leave, which started immediately, or a week before I was supposed to be there. And so I went in on I think it was the 10th of April in 1943. But when my chance to join the Army came, I was very keen on it. And I had my bags packed 2 nights before I was supposed to go in. I think it upset my mother a bit that I was so eager to go. But I did that, and was very glad to have done it. The only regret I had at that point was that I had been nominated for to enter or to join a group of promising language students. I can't think what the name of it was, but anyway, some national or local organization maybe. And I would have been inducted, as it were, on the day that I went into the service, so I couldn't take advantage of that. But anyway, so I went in. After going to the induction center in Los Angeles, I was sent off to a reception center, I believe it was called, sort of east of town, an area called Arlington. And I must have been in there for 4 weeks. It seemed like a long time. And eventually, or at the end of that time, I was sent to an Air Force camp in Fresno, California, and I was sent there for basic training, and it was really a great experience because we could sing in ranks. You know, people were very highly motivated and really enjoyed being there in the Air Force. Well, one of the last things I did there was to take a series of tests, and they were mechanical tests, and I think it had to do with various parts of an aircraft engine. There was a whole array of them, I don't know, 15 different things, and I evidently didn't do very well in those, in fitting the parts in or whatever I had to do. So just after that, I saw a notice on the wall of a building saying that there was going to be a cryptographic aptitude test given in a day or so. So I thought, well, that sounds interesting. So I signed up for that and took it. I seemed to have no trouble with it. And 2 days after that, taking the test, I was put on a train for Sacramento, California, to Camp Kohler, which is a Signal Corps camp. And so I had my basic, I began basic again, only it was Signal Corps basic rather than Air Force basic. So I did that, and even qualified as a marksman, although it took 2 tries. And then after that was over, it was just after, I was called in to be interviewed by a Signal Corps major, he was in rank, who asked me several questions about whether I'd be interested in joining a signal center team. And he didn't go into much in the way of detail, but it sounded fine to me. I said, sure. So a day or 2 later, I was put on a train for Camp Crowder, Missouri, in the southwestern corner of the state. And there I underwent some basic training. I was first of all put on a Russian speaking team, because they were organized teams by language, and that because Stalin didn't want Americans to get over there and get involved in communications, the team was disbanded, so they never sent anybody to Russia. So I next went on to a Portuguese team. This is all because I had training in that, particularly at Los Angeles Junior College. And that lasted for a little while until I was yanked out and put on an Italian-speaking team, which is where that caused me to go to Italy and North Africa and Italy. And but it was just one of those things. What happened was that we were originally supposed to have gone with the Fifth Army, which was operating in Italy. Well, it was also someone that had been in North Africa, but we were supposed to have gone directly to Italy. But somehow our orders got lost, or there was some screw up, and we were diverted to Oran, to North Africa instead. And it was only later, I guess after something like 4 months, that they found us, and that's why we were put on a ship bound for Bagnoli, bound for Naples. When we got there, Naples had been liberated, and that whole area to the south was free of Germans. But the Germans were a little to the north, and of course there were still the battles of Salerno and Anzio that came up. But anyway, we stayed at Caserta, which was an important headquarters, military headquarters. And then we were shot off to Florence, and then to the Fuda Pass. We were in Lucca, set up headquarters there on a rather high rise or mountainous area. It was a very nice place to be. And one of the highlights was the owner of the place, elderly man, who had wine in his cellar, and he invited us to dinner and brought his best wines up from the cellar, and we thought that was pretty cool. And then after a while there, various of us were farmed out, and I was sent to work with the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, which was quite a lark, because those guys were really, they had to hack their way out of the jungle to get to their draft boards. Essentially, they knew very little, and I had the experience of trying to teach them signal center procedure, and I could tell that, and I was teaching them in English at first, and I could tell that just from their looks in their eyes that they weren't grasping what was being said. So I decided to teach them in Portuguese, because I'd had my semester and a half of Portuguese, and that seemed to work a little better. But they were a rummy lot, and they really weren't with it. In fact, I probably have told you this story before, that in a group before our group, that is before we got there, they had been taught by other people, other military people, and they also had been taught the use of the hand grenade. And they've been told that if you the hand grenade and release it or uncap it, after 5 seconds it explodes. So these guys thought they'd test that theory. One guy was killed, another guy was injured, maimed his hand, and so they learned a lesson in handling hand grenades. So it was that kind of thing. And they would sell their shoes. They would go to a march and sell their shoes to the Italians, because they weren't used to wearing shoes anyway. But a very happy-go-lucky bunch. There was a kind of a medical emergency on the part of my family. My mother was ill, and I mentioned this to my commanding officer, Lieutenant Gleason, and so next thing I know, they arranged for me to go home on compassionate leave or whatever it's called, and I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I'd stayed on, but I guess I thought it was urgent enough, so I went back. This was in the spring, and the war was over by August anyway. I went from Naples Airport, or Capodichino Airport, flew to Palermo, and just to change planes, and then flew across to Algiers, and from Algiers, another plane to Casablanca. And I think it was 4 days in Casablanca, waiting for another plane to take me to Dakar in French West Africa, Senegal it is. And then we went across to Brazil, to Recife. And then I caught another plane to Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then to Miami. And then after that I took a train to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Los Angeles. It was quite a bit of travel. No, at that point I was still in the service, and I was assigned to a signal center in Los Angeles. And there it was preparing messages for Washington, for the War Department. And there was a routine of creating tapes that recorded the messages that had gone out and come in. So I was responsible for some of that. I was asked to go into the code room, which was a place where cipher messages were deciphered and enciphered as well. So I did that until we were let out in February of 45, I think it was. That was the end of my tour of duty. But it was kind of an interesting time. And it was very good for me for promotions, because I got 2 promotions while I was there in that rather short space of time. In fact, I was promoted to sergeant and then to staff sergeant, and I was told that if I wanted to re-up, why I would automatically get a tech sergeant's rating, which is just below a master sergeant's. But I decided not to go to college instead. So that's when I went out to Pomona.
So Pomona, you studied languages more?
Yeah, and a lot of music too, music theory and history. Participated in the chorus, men's chorus, and then later in the glee club. And I was on one of the glee club trips that went up to the coast of California, into Oregon and Washington, and to Vancouver, British Columbia. So we gave concerts along the way, of course, in all those places.
So what were your ideas about what you wanted to do after college at that time? Did you have some clarity on that, or?
I don't think I really knew exactly, except I thought maybe something along the music line, or something on the language line. Oh, one thing I did at the time of graduation, I was found to be short, I think 6 credits, or maybe, no, I think it was only 3 credits. So I said, well, can I take a test or something? And it boiled down to my taking a test in Russian. And so they brought in a Russian teacher, I think, to do it. And I did very well in that, and got an A grade for that test.
So Hugo's Russian provided you with the basis for this A in that course?
Yeah.
There was an independent study. How difficult was the test, in your opinion, in hindsight?
I didn't think it was difficult at all.
So what is it? You have a photographic memory for languages? Why do you think you have such a facility?
I don't know. Except that I got those books when I was age 11. I remember seeing her at graduation time when we were in a group waiting for something or other. And so I went over and said hi and wished her all the best and so forth. And that was that. In the summer of 48, I had a counselor's job at a camp in Vermont. And it turned out that I was to be the chief horseback riding counselor, which you would recognize as an immediately as a talent. Yeah, I was in Iowa at the time, and I had the idea. In fact, I planned to come back to Los Angeles, but before I did, I was in a card shop and I saw a Valentine, which the thought of it was a Valentine to keep us in touch. Never seen another one like it. But I sent it to her, and she wrote back, and so we agreed to have a date after I got there. So that's how that happened. So anyway, we met it was a Friday, and we went out to dinner at the Swiss Chalet or Swiss something or other in the southern part of Los Angeles. It was a very nice place. It's no longer in existence. So we had a date. We went to the Palladium where people dance, and there's usually a good band. And we were engaged 4 days later.
Oh my goodness.
Talk about precipitous. She, in the meantime, got a fellowship to go to Radcliffe for the management training program, which has since been absorbed into the Harvard Business School. But at that time, it was a Radcliffe entity, and so she got this management training program thing, and so she went back east, and so then I had been working in New York in the advertising business for a short period of time, and then not long after she arrived there in Boston, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, well, I decided to go on up there, and which is what I did. And then, so we were married soon after in Cambridge proper. After we were married, I got a job with U.S. Rubber Company in their sales department, and that summer I took off and we headed for the Berkshires because they were having a music festival there. They have it every year, and I participated in that. We got to Putney School because there was a teacher training program is what it was. And so we had a year there, and I taught in the school, taught Spanish and Latin.
Which you picked up through a Hugo Latin book?
I've never had a Spanish course, ever.
So nevertheless, you ended up teaching Spanish at the high school without any Spanish.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was at that was not at the Putney School. That was at the Stockbridge School, where I went to after you were at Putney. And so I was teaching Spanish, French, and something called general language, which is where you sort of explain the structure, the various linguistic structures, and the development of languages, and comparing like French with Spanish and Latin and stuff like that. So So there was that at the Stockbridge School, and also dormitory duties. Well, then after that year, I decided I wanted to go back to Pomona and do some further graduate work. So we, in 52, I guess it was, we packed the car and drove west, across Canada, across northern United States, and down to eventually to California. So I did embark on a terrific program of actually medieval music and the whole schmear of music history. Also, while I was there, I took a Russian course, and while I was there, a recruiter from NSA appeared on the scene, and so they explained when he was going to be there and at what point, what building. So I attended that session, and he explained in a very general way the sort of things that one might be doing if one was hired with NSA, like reading newspapers, and he mentioned a lot of unclassified stuff. And I began to sense that this was something that hush-hush, and might involve cryptography or cryptanalysis. So I told him, I said, well, in the service I was a cryptographic technician, and would this be of any interest to NSA? So he sort of was taken aback, and he said, well, yes, in general, it would be.
Okay, so you figured out that this is what they were really interested in.
Yeah.
They were so vague, but you thought, there must be something more to this than reading newspapers, right?
Yeah. And also I think he must have said something about languages too. And I probably told him the language that I'd been working with, exposed to, and such like.
Your laundry list of languages.
I was given a test, a Russian language test, and which was supervised by one of the instructors there at Pomona, and so I did that and sent that in, and it was on that basis that I got an offer, but that I'd done so well on the Russian test that I was offered a job. The lady that was sort of monitoring the test, I mean, she in and out, she gave me extra time so I could finish more of it. But it was
nice. That probably made all the difference.
Bit of luck.
Yeah, a bit of luck, yeah. So they were obviously looking for Russian speakers. The Cold War was beginning.
Yeah.
That was what they were.
Yeah, this was really at the beginning of the Cold War.
Yeah.
After I was hired, but after arriving, I was sent to the Library of Congress for just a few weeks, and I think it was until my clearance came through, and I had a chance to work on some book in Russian that had to do with Mongolia, and so I worked on that and translated some of it, and so that was kind of a neat exposure, where we had to look at a lot of material that had come in and determine which would be of interest to the intelligence community and avoid ditch what wouldn't be. So that was one thing, the enormous size of the problem and the amount of material involved. And then that branch was absorbed, and so most of us were transferred to another branch, which dealt with something entirely different, but military sort of subjects. And so I was in that for some time. Then I had an offer from a man that was in charge of our carpool, because he was in another division, a so-called Navy division, and he asked me if I would like a job there, and with prospects of promotion pretty rapid. So I said sure.
So this was naval intelligence as opposed to military Army intelligence, is that fair to say?
Well, his particular bailiwick was. So I did that, and for several months, which did involve encryption and decryption and stuff like that. Until one day, I was offered the proposition of going to England to serve at the sort of the counterpart agency of NSA. So I talked it over with her mom, and she said, "Sounds fine." And so in that July of '55, we got on a ship and headed for England. Part of something called the Combined Naval Party, and so there were a number of naval people involved there, and so it was all connected with that. So that was it. So we were there for over 2 years in Cheltenham.
Working on naval matters, was it essentially?
No, not exactly. I was on something naval for a short period, and then I was asked to go into another branch, which was it dealt with a different topic. So, and I was with that branch for the rest of the time I was there. Just very.
Was that encryption, or is that other?
No, it was dealt with what they call plain text.
They use that phrase in computers now. What does that mean, plain text?
I don't think it means the same thing.
Yeah, it probably doesn't. Yeah.
When we got to England in July of 1955, we stayed in a hotel, and it was called the Murray House Hotel in a suburban part of Cheltenham. And it turned out that the gardeners had been assigned there too, and we met them like maybe at a dinner time or lunch or something like that, and we got together after that and became great friends. But Meredith did some very important work. He was on a very highly classified project that the British were also involved with, and was being worked on in Washington as well, or at NSA proper. This project was called Venona, and the title Soviet Espionage and the American Response from 1939 to 1957. Well, messages were sent from KGB in Moscow to Washington and other places, and some of these messages contained references to U.S. spies that were actually working for the Soviet Union at the time. And Meredith's work involved, of course, these guys had code names, men and women both. They had code names that were used in these messages, and Meredith managed to, you might say, decipher them and identify by name some of these people. The most important two people that he identified were Julius and Ethel Rosenbergs. A lot of people feel that she shouldn't have been executed because she wasn't that instrumental in giving secrets away to the Russians, but Julius Rosenberg definitely was. And although his son, I guess it is, has been trying for years to exonerate him, but he hasn't succeeded yet, and I don't think he has a real claim. Whether he should have been executed per se is another matter, but he was certainly guilty. But anyway, that was a big find, and Meredith was kind of upset when he learned that Julius Rosenberg had been executed, because he's not a violent man, and I don't think he thought the punishment really fitted the crime. But anyway, that was his opinion. He resorted to what's known as book breaking, which is when you have a message in cipher that is not like a simple substitution or any other type of equivalence. That is, where say a letter in a message equals another letter. But for example, if you have a code book, and that code book has a lot of entries in it, A through Z, those entries can be enciphered. For example, let's say airplane. It could be a string of numbers that don't have a relationship to the letters. Well, it could be done systematically, but it would certainly seem random. It's not instantly recognizable. I mean, you don't know what it means, but there are ways through what's known as book breaking that you can eventually, and with enough outside help, that is collateral material that might give you a clue to it. But it's a very long and arduous process, and he did this for a number of years. So Meredith was involved in that, and got a high kudos. He got recognition at the CIA, in fact, several years ago, where he was honored for his work. There's a technique called a one-time pad, which is used, or supposed to be used, just once but you get a pad with lots of variations on it that you can use. But that theoretically, and I think for all practical purposes, can't be broken, because you don't, the decipherer doesn't get enough material to go on. You've heard of the Ultra system or the Enigma system, which the British worked on initially, and then some Americans joined them over there in the early 40s to work on this German encryption system, which involves rotors and 4 or 5 rotors. The later editions had 5, so that when you sit at a keyboard in front of the machine and say you type a letter, that will, because of the setup of the rotors and the position of the rotors, which contain all the letters of the alphabet, because of that, a light will go on, and it'll in a little box, I think it is, that'll show you what the code letter, the enciphered code letter is. Well, this is very difficult to decipher because there are enough obstacles there, and the machine the settings change daily. So this is one example of machine encipherment and decipherment that makes it very difficult to break. The British were intercepting the particularly German naval messages, because the Germans were sinking British and later American ships, which got to be a terrible situation, obviously. So, because the settings changed virtually daily, they had to be able to break these things and get the information out to the Navy, the Admiralty, so that they could take action on the German subs. This goes back a long way. It goes back to the early 30s, and it was the Poles that got wind of this device and began working on it well before the beginning of World War II. And they shared the information with the French, and then the British were brought in. So there was a long period of work on deciphering an actual machine, finding the setup, how it was organized, so they could reverse engineer it, as it were. But they did manage to do it, particularly with the help of Alan Turing, who was a real genius, and who devised a device called a bomb, which enabled you to process a lot of messages and figure out their basic setup. He was an amazing guy. He was homosexual, and the British hounded him and wouldn't let him work after the war, and I think he finally committed suicide. But he was one of the heroes of this whole business. I got an offer to go with AID. In fact, it was through Sam Butterfield, who I told him I'd be interested in something maybe involved with training, and he, after several weeks, came up with something. But I think it was a big mistake on my part to have taken that. I was destined to go to what they called then Detachment R, but in Germany, for a Russian language course. Well, not just language, but military, economics, politics, the lot. And that would have been for 2 years in Oberammergau. You kids would have all
Spoken German.
Yeah.
So they were grooming you for, more elevated posts.
As it were, I would have been promoted in about the same time if I'd stayed there and actually gone with a promotion to Germany. So it was a big mistake, I think, doing that. Although the positive side is that while I was away from the agency and in the mid 60s, I had a chance to go to Africa. I was with the English Language Services Organization, and we were developing language courses for the Peace Corps. And in Malawi, which is that part of Africa that these languages were spoken, or at least that one of them was, namely Tumbuka, we were sent out to gather some information for a textbook from native speakers. Anyway, I was in Blantyre in Malawi for a few months. In fact, there was a little team of us. There were 2 other people along with me, and I would exert some linguistic control over it to be sure we got kind of grammatical examples that I thought we needed. We had a recording guy with us, and in addition, a textbook writer who had worked on other similar books. In other words, I didn't have to know the language per se, but know enough about linguistics and putting together stuff.
Sounds great.
So that was that, and then we went to Niger, to Niamey, the capital of it, in sort of West Africa, to do a Germa course, which is the language they spoke there. So again, just 2 of us went and put together some material for the development of a course. I would exert some linguistic control over it to be sure we got kind of grammatical examples that I thought we needed. We had a recording guy with us. In addition, a textbook writer who had worked on other similar books. So that, in other words, I didn't have to know the language per se, but know enough about linguistics and putting together stuff.
Sounds great.
So there was that 5 months period, I think, altogether when I was in Africa, doing that kind of work. After a while, I did come back to NSA. It was pretty interesting. In fact, I was given a branch? No, a team. I was a team within a branch, and it was okay. I generally had good assignments there. They were looking for somebody who knew Italian, and somehow, they checked the records and they found that I was down as a speaker of Italian or somebody who knew Italian. So I was asked if I would be willing to go to Venice. And this was at the time that Ronald Reagan was attending a summit, an economic summit. Margaret Thatcher was there and a number of heads of state. Our job in general was to exercise security for his visit, or in connection with his visit there. And we had a way of checking out who was approaching the place and who was on the river. So that was why I was sent there, which had nothing to do with the TDYs in Eastern Europe, but it was just Venice. We worked shifts on this, and at that time, well, we sort of went round the clock, but I was on an evening shift at that time, and it was rather late on it. I think it probably, yeah, I think it was after midnight, but I began to feel not well, and so I told people that I was leaving, that I was going to go to the bathroom or just get away for a bit. So I did, and I broke out into a sweat, forehead, arms, everything, which I'd never experienced before. So I began to realize that maybe this was more serious than I thought. So I reported it to the embassy people there, and the doctor in charge, was a White House doctor, and she said that I ought to be sent right away by boat, as it turns out, to a hospital, which happens to pride itself on its cardiology department. So I was put on a little boat and went over to where this hospital was, and I spent actually about 3 weeks there. They administered a drug called urokinase, and that dissolved whatever clot was in the veins, and which is very fortunate, because I might not have survived if I hadn't had that. And it wasn't used much in this country. So if I'd had the heart attack here, there's no telling how I would have come out. But anyway, that was fun. I was in a happy-go-lucky bunch of Italians there. Somehow he was told, and he sent me a letter, which I have not been able to find. But he, sent an appreciation letter and hope I'll be better and that kind of stuff.
Were you on a diplomatic passport?
Yeah.
I see. So you actually did work at the U.S. Embassy?
In Warsaw, as in the other countries. We have our own setup. Sofia, Bulgaria, Belgrade, Yugoslavia. I guess it was still Yugoslavia in those days. Yeah, because that was before the war in Croatia, in Bosnia. And then Budapest, Hungary, and also Vienna. This is in '88 when I visited them on a kind of a familiarization tour, because I hadn't been to those places before, and the company wanted me to.
The company meaning NSA?
Well, yes, in a way, although we were a subset of that, which had a different name entirely. It was called the Special Collection Service.
I think collection referring to collecting information as opposed to collecting past due bills. Special.
No, we didn't dun anybody.
Right, we didn't dun anybody.
We wanted to make conversation, he'd been in the States and was a driver for whoever his boss was. And I'm sure that he wanted me to give him to offer him a drink or something like that, which I decided not to do. But he then said he knew that describe myself as an administrative officer, because he mentioned that. And I said, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? So, but he was acting a little cagey about it. So, and anyway, he didn't get very far with me. You know, in his questioning, I gave him routine or bland answers. And then finally I said, oh, and his name was George. I slapped him on the back. I said, George, I've had a long day, so take care. Good night. And walked off. Never saw him again. So there I was assigned to the U.S. Embassy obviously in Vienna. And I had quite interesting work there, in which it's kind of electronic espionage. But maybe we don't want to say that. Yeah, basically collecting data, although we did support the Defense Attaché's office, and at least I did in my capacity, providing them with certain information. And also we dealt with the chief of station, who was a CIA guy, in a similar capacity. So I mean, that's what that time was about. That was about 93. I think it was the latter part of 93. Well, it was several months at the CIA. And then I came back to the agency, and I was at the Pentagon. I guess I was there in 94 and 95, is what it was. And then in my last 6 weeks, I was asked to go to Defense Intelligence Agency, had an operation going. So I was sort of a liaison guy. I assisted their analysts in getting supporting materials and reports and that kind of stuff from NSA. And so I would go around and talk to people, and then I'd go out to NSA and get the documents that they wanted. It was that kind of operation.
So how do you transport top secret documents?
Well, you have to have a special permit.
And you just hope that they don't get lost.
I saw to it they didn't get lost. I took it in my stride. I think it was a good time to go. A number of people left at that time, and the agency was changing, and there weren't any more interesting assignments. Well, I could have gone back to the Pentagon, but I really had enough of that too.
You worked Europe, you worked Eastern Europe, you worked the Washington establishment.
Yeah.
You pretty much saw it all.
You can't possibly see it all with NSA, because it's such a vast organization, and there's so many different kind of blocks, you might say, different functions. The computer function alone is vast, and I have very little to do with that. And there's signal security, for example. That's a field that they work on there. They check our own crypto security. And they want to see, for example, if they can break the codes that we use, because if they can do that, maybe the enemy can too. Well, we've had our defectors, or we've had our people who gave away information, and some of them were caught. There was the Pelton case, and
Did they do it for ideological reasons or financial reasons?
mostly financial, yeah. Well, there was this guy, he worked down at, I think at Newport News or someplace like that, but I had access to NSA materials, and he sold those to the Russians, yeah, and he was finally apprehended because he had his whole family involved, and it was just astounding. And then there was that guy who gave secrets away to the Israelis, and he's been languishing in prison for 16 years now. And I think there've been 2 or 3 more, not many really, but a few. There was that Cambridge group in the late 30s who were students there, but they were all communists, and some of them, if not all of them, betrayed British secrets to the Soviets, and a couple of them defected to Moscow and died over there. So, yeah, we don't have anything quite that bad, I guess. Yeah, I think some of the things I was involved with did contribute to the outcome of the Cold War. Although I think really the Russians did it themselves. Their economy and their government system were working against them, really. And although we made it difficult, and we also, I think, caused them to overspend on armaments just to keep up with us, or what they thought was we were doing. So that sort of bled the Russian economy. So, you know, people say, oh, well, it was Ronald Reagan or God knows who, Gorbachev maybe, but it was not just those guys. It was something internal that spelled the doom of the Russia that we knew, or the Soviet Union as we knew it. And so in 1991, with the intervention of Gorbachev and Yeltsin, the country was ready to change and dissolve. And that's how I see it. And I think that's a reasonable assessment of what went on. Отец приехал навестить сына, который учился в городе. Он позвонил у двери его квартиры. Хозяйка дома открыла ему дверь. Дома ли студент Иванов? Он студент? Да. Я думал, что он ночной сторож, ответила хозяйка. A father arrived to visit his son, who was studying in town. He rang at the door of his apartment. It's flat. The owner of the house opened the door to him. Is student Ivanov here, or is he at home? The answer, he's a student? Yeah. I thought that he was a night watchman, answered the owner.
That's great. Okay.
Need any more? That was 1980, I think. Went from Cairo to Luxor, I guess it was. Visited the Valley of the Kings, and then we went further south to to Abu Simbel, which was quite a very, very hot day too. And we visited the tomb of Ramses the second, I guess it was. Anyway, he has these huge statues of him in front. Well, Han, was that Ramses?
I'm sorry?
Ramses' tomb in the Abu Simbel?
It's a temple. It's a temple. It's a temple.
It's a temple.
It's not a tomb.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
Oh,
but
okay.
it was Ramses,
Was it
wasn't
the
it?
longest day of the year? The light comes right straight down the center of the tomb and lights up the god at the very darkest part of it,
Yeah.
part of the monument.
But that was Ramses, was it not?
Well, built by Ramses.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest guy.
Yeah.
The big guy.
But I think it was 94. We were in Vienna. We were associated with a UN group because the UN headquarters there, and we had friends there, and that organization sponsored a trip to China. But that trip was organized by the wife of the Chinese ambassador to Vienna, or the United Nations, and it was a super trip. It was about 2 weeks long, and she arranged everything, and where we stayed, and recommended places to eat, and all that. We went to Xi'an in the west, and while we were there, we visited the clay warriors. Oh, we got to Shanghai, and there were a couple of other towns whose names I forget just now, but it was really a great trip, and we would have never had it except that lady was in an influential position, or was influential herself, to arrange it. So it was done with the blessing of the Chinese authorities and all that. And yeah, it was really, really fine. That was a highlight. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I climbed a good bit of it and got photographed doing so. I also came back with a shirt that says in Chinese and in English, "I climbed the Great Wall." We've done actually several cruises over the years, and most of them to the Mediterranean. This time, we took the Queen Mary over to Southampton, and then we had several days in London, and then we came back to Southampton and took got on the Queen Victoria, which is a relatively new ship, and this was a Mediterranean cruise. So we went south to Lisbon and around the Pillars of Hercules into the Mediterranean. One highlight was stopping in Lisbon, and we had several days at a wonderful hotel there that our travel agent had recommended. It was a super hotel, and I had a chance to. It had a bar, of course, and there was an elderly pianist there, and somehow we fell to talking, and he said, "Will you play something?" So I played a few tunes. He thought that was just great. Stopped at Majorca, that island just to the east of Spain, and then Corsica as well. And then we went over to Civitavecchia outside of Rome. We also went to Nice in France, and then to Barcelona, and then it went on up in Bay of Biscay to the island of Guernsey, which is a British island. So anyway, we got a chance to see Guernsey again, which was very nice. Victor Hugo had a house there, and he wrote Les Miserables in that very house. Washington's not so bad. Well, London is certainly a favorite of mine, and Venice, and Florence. I think those three. London is made up of many Londons. You know, it's not just one entity in itself. It's made up of several entities, and I don't know. I just like the atmosphere there and the feel of it. Also like Cheltenham too, but I don't know that it's all that much of a favorite, but I certainly did like it. Oh, the Hobnails, yeah. You've been there. Well, it's out of town a ways. It's a place that sells food and drink. Well, one thing they had was baps, called baps, which is a kind of a bun or a roll that they would put different kinds of meat in, like ham or beef, I guess, as well, and absolutely delicious. We really enjoyed it. They had good English beer. Yeah, we were back there a few years ago, and I remember the fellow behind the bar was pleased to hear that we'd come back after all these years. Well, I'd say that time in Cheltenham was one of the most, if not the most. On the other hand, the time in Vienna was also a very good time.
Retirement. What's that like? You're studying Italian. You're playing music. You travel. Pretty nice, right?
Yeah. I also read the Wall Street Journal for the Washington Ear, which is for the blind. Those people subscribe, and I record it by telephone. Now, I used to have to go in, but since it's been developed over the last few years, that I can dial a number on my phone and get into their computer and record what I've selected for the day, and so I do that. It's just once a week, but I've been doing that, I realized, for 10 years.
Wow.
In fact, I got a mention or a commendation or something at the 10-year point. I think it must be 12 years now. Anyway. I also tutored there's a firm that deals with literacy, and I was trained there, and this is all gratis. I mean, it's all, I don't get paid for it, but I learned their system, and then I had a student for many months. It was a black fellow who was really illiterate, and I tried to get him on the path of recognizing letters and how that worked according to the system that they've set up and the books they use. it was a hard struggle, and he only got so far in it. He would have been in his, I think, late 40s. Yeah.
You play piano every day, most every day, and you have been?
Well, almost, yeah, almost. Not as much as I should, or would like to. I think really when I started with Mel in 72, July of 72, since that time it's been pretty frequent anyway, if not daily.
That's 35 years.
Is it that long? Yeah. So yeah, so we got to Ulaanbaatar in the early morning, and so I joined the group then, and we had a few days there, and visited a monastery and Buddhist sort of things, and stayed at a very nice hotel. I think it was the Genghis Khan Hotel, and we were there for the Nadam festival, which they hold every year, and it's a festival where they feature horseback riding, archery, and wrestling. So that's a big deal. So, and huge crowds. And one thing the government does at Nadam Festival, they release a number of prisoners from their jails, just as a, I don't know why, but they do it. On another day, we went out to see the horses, the horse racing, and that was fun to see. Then, at the end of these 3 days, I guess it was, we took a train to heading north to the Siberian border. Well, it so happens that there had been very, very heavy rains in that part of Siberia, and I guess northern Mongolia too, which managed to wash out the tracks. So that our tour leader had to arrange for a bus to take us to Ulan-Ude, which is an industrial town. In fact, there used to be an aircraft plant there, maybe still is. We got to Ulan-Ude, and one of the things that was featured on this was a visit to what they call old believers, to an old believers house. These are the people who came from Russia, actually I guess a couple of hundred years ago, because they disputed some what we might think were sort of petty features in their gospel, and so they're split. They're at odds. Some people believe this way, and other people believe that way. But anyway, they were very cordial to us, and they were already there waiting for us when we arrived, and they had a tray of little eats and little glasses of vodka, and wonderful vodka, just super. And so then we went inside and eventually had a big dinner at long tables, and there were dances, and they put in singing, they put on stuff. So these old believers are they're living. Finally, they did fix the train. I guess it was in Irkutsk that we finally joined it. We also spent some time in Irkutsk. Then we went on across Siberia and into Russia. Stopped at Yekaterinburg, which used to be called Sverdlovsk, but in the earlier days it was Yekaterinburg, and it's now called Yekaterinburg, which is where the Tsar's family were murdered. And we were taken to the spot where we think they were buried. I'm not altogether sure that that really was the spot, but that's what we were told. So that was nice. And then we got to Kazan, which is an interesting place. It's right on the Volga River, and we were able to go on a little boat ride on the Volga while we were there, and then back to Moscow. When we visited St. Basil's Church, which is famous at one end of Red Square, and there's the GUM department store, which stands for three Russian words, which mean a general department store, something like that. And I got your mother a necklace there, which she likes very much. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's how that turned out. It was just a delightful trip. I'd like to go to Vladivostok on the the Russian East Coast, as it were, just to see that place, because it's always been sort of fascinated by it. A little boy and his teacher. Петя, ты знаешь алфавит? Да. Какая буква идет после А? Все другие. Teacher St. Peter, do you know the alphabet? And he said, yes. What letter comes after A, or A? And his answer, all the others. These are students speaking. Наш преподаватель физики разговаривает сам с собой, а ваш, наш тоже. Но он этого не понимает. Он думает, что мы его слушаем. Our teacher of physics talks to himself. How about yours? Ours too. But he doesn't understand it. He thinks that we're listening to him. Oh, one last one here. Сын обращается к отцу. Папочка, когда человек научится говорить, чему он еще должен учиться? Молчать, отвечает отец. A son addresses his father. Papa, when a person learns to speak, what must he further learn? To be silent, answers the father. These are stupid little jokes, but I sort of enjoy them. There's certain lessons to be learned, and that I have. For example, leaving an organization or a job too soon, or not taking advantage of for example, I was mentioning yesterday the overseas possibility of studying Russian for 2 years in Germany. That I really regret not doing, and so, but and if I had, I think it would have made a lot of difference in say future assignments and all that. And And even though I did come back on the agency, but I think I would have been better off if I'd stayed.
Anything else you want to say? Any other insight, conclusion, protest, Any major gripes you want to get off your chest?
No. Any mistakes were of my own making. Один человек, не торопясь, шел под проливным дождем. Какой-то прохожий сказал ему: «Почему вам не пойти быстрее?» «А к чему спешить?» – ответил он. «Разве впереди не такой же проливной дождь?» A man, without hurrying, was going along under a downpour of rain. Some passerby said to him, Why don't you hurry up? Why don't you go a little faster?" "Oh, what purpose? Why should I hurry?" He answered, "Surely up ahead it's the same downpour."
That's great.
I've got another one. This is Paul V. Cooper. I'm going to play 15 songs from the Great American Songbook. I'm going to record them using the Edirol R09 recorder. The first tune number 1, is All the Things You Are, written by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein II. It's from the musical comedy Very Warm for May, 1939. Number 2, But Beautiful, written by Jimmy Van Heusen and Johnny Burke in 1947. Number 3, On Green Dolphin Street, written by Bronislaw Kaper and Ned Washington, from the MGM film Green Dolphin Street, 1947. Number 5, Every Time We Say Goodbye, written by Cole Porter. It's from the Seven Lively Arts, 1944. Number 6, Sunday, Monday, or Always, written by Jimmy Van Heusen and Johnny Burke in 1943. Number 7, A Foggy Day in London Town, written by George and Ira Gershwin, from the film Damsel in Distress, 1937. Number 8, April in Paris, Vernon Duke and E.Y. Yip Harburg, from Walk a Little Faster, 1932. Number 9, I'll Remember April, words and music by Don Ray, Gene DePaul, Pat Johnston, in 1942. Number 10, Autumn in New York, written by Vernon Duke, from Thumbs Up, 1934. Number 11, Satin Doll, written by Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington, 1958. Number 12, Skylark, written by Hoagie Carmichael and Johnny Mercer, in 1941. Number 13, Stella by Starlight, by Victor Young and Ned Washington, 1946. How Deep is the Ocean, written by Irving Berlin. It was from Face the Music, in 1932. And number 15, I Remember You, written by Victor Scherzinger and Johnny Mercer, from the Fleet's Inn in 1941. I Remember You, Victor Scherzinger and Johnny Mercer, from The Fleet Sin, 1941. There's an Italian one. Una graziosa signorina entrò in una bottega, scelse un paio di guanti e ne domandò il prezzo. Un bacio, rispose con galanteria il commesso di negozio. Va benissimo, disse la signorina, datemene tre paia, ed oggi, dopo pranzo, manderò mia nonna per il pagamento. A gracious or pretty miss entered a shop, chose a pair of gloves, and asked the price of them. A kiss, replied with gallantry the salesman. Excellent, said the lady. Give me 3 pairs, and today, after dinner, I'll send my grandmother for payment. Un maestro diceva al padre d'un suo alunno: vostro figlio è un sprecone, beve 6 o 7 bicchieri di birra al giorno, e ciò mi pare troppo per un ragazzo. Sì, è vero, osservò il padre dell'alunno, ma bisogna tener conto che in altre cose è molto economo. Per esempio, acqua non beve mai. A teacher was saying to the father of one of his students, your son is a spendthrift. He drinks 6 or 7 glasses of beer a day, and that seems to me to be too much for a boy. Yes, it's true, observed the father of the student, but you must keep in mind that in other things he's very economical. For example, water he never drinks. Is that enough?